Listen up.
About the climate crisis, it's got a lot to do with food and how we use land. I want to take a closer look at this. A new report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warns that the crisis is not, if it's not addressed, things like rising temperatures, extreme weather, and land degradation could trigger a global food crisis. More than 100 scientists co-authored this report, which took a close look at two factors: how agriculture would be affected by global warming, is being affected really by global warming, and how food production could actually contribute to climate change down the road. The United Nations panel concluded that if average global temperatures rise 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, a road we're on, by the way, already, climate-related risks to health, livelihood, food security, water supply, human security, and economic growth are projected to increase. Now, this is fairly logical, right? We know the obvious issue: severe weather. We know that more frequent and devastating hurricanes are around, flooding, wildfires, drought, and they cause crops and livestock around the world to suffer. But here's where the health risks come in. The report found that when there's more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the quality of nutrients in certain crops decreases. It's also important to remember that food production adds to the problem as well. The panel notes that agriculture and other land uses make up about 13% of the world's carbon dioxide emissions, making for a complicated and vicious cycle. So the question is, what is the solution? And joining me now to try to answer that question is someone we turn to on these issues, Bill Nye the Science Guy, the host of the Science Rules podcast. Bill, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
This is important because often when we think about...
This is important, yes.
If we think about climate change, we're often thinking about industry and smokestacks and things like that. But if we really want to change this on a massive scale, it does have to include our thoughts about food, consumption and production.
So everybody, when I was young, I came to the World's Fair here in New York, New York. The town's so nice they named it twice, and there were 3 billion people in the world. Now there's 7.4. By some reckonings, there could be 7.7 billion people in the world. By 2030, there'll still only be 8 billion. By 2050, there'll be 9. There might be 10 billion people. Everybody's going to want to eat.
Yes.
And that is crops, food production. And so we're going to have less arable land because for two big reasons that are associated with climate change. First is just sea level rise. I was just, Joe Biden's running for president in Delaware. They have soil that's called sandy loam. As ocean water intrudes on the agricultural land, that's less productive. Corn doesn't grow as well and so on. And this is true in Holland. It's certainly going to be true in Southeast Asia. I mean, in Western Asia. So this is going to be a problem. And the other thing, cities are getting bigger. We're encroaching on arable land. But if you look at it in the big picture, we have always fed everybody. And so this gets into this idea where genetically modified crops might be a good thing. And so my emphasis to everybody is there's no one thing. It's not let's stop having cows. It's not let's stop flying airplanes. No, it's going to be everybody doing everything all at once. And by everybody, I mean managers, government. We have to think of the earth as our home, and we got to run it the way you run a house. You got to maintain the insulation, the windows, the air handling system, the food input and output, the waste. You got to handle all that. And so this idea that regulations are inherently bad, I think, is inherently flawed. It's just wrong. What we need is more regulations, and I don't mean regulations for regulation's sake. In the same way a machine should have all the parts it needs with no extra parts,
we should have the regulation.
We need it. And you pay taxes on the whole road, but you don't get to drive on both sides. We have rules. It's good.
So let's talk about this nutrient density. A lot of the world survives on basic crops and basic proteins.
Rice is a big one.
So you take rice, right? And there's some research that had gone into the decreasing nutrients in rice as a result of carbon in the atmosphere. This is important because if you live in a poor country where you're really dependent on rice and you start to get fewer nutrients and you've got less arable land and all these things are happening, this ends up affecting us all because that's why we have massive migration. And that's something that we've not even seen the beginnings of compared to what could happen.
And I remind us the U.S. military is very concerned about climate change for this very reason. The displaced populations, what are they going to do, where are they going to go, what are they going to do, what are they going to eat? And furthermore, if you raise kids with less nutrients, they're less capable, they are less productive, and on and on. So everybody, you can get concerned that these problems are overwhelming and unsolvable, but they are solvable if we all decide to solve them.
But we haven't.
Well, but
we're not even all decided that it's really a thing.
Well, that's the good work of the fossil fuel industry has worked so hard to introduce the idea that scientific uncertainty, plus or minus a couple percent, is somehow the change the same as 100%.
Yeah.
That's all wrong, which is wrong. So I just think about the opportunities. Something, if we had limitless, renewably produced electricity, we could address all these problems. Now, right now, we don't have limitless, renewably produced, reliable electricity, but we could. There's enough sunlight, there's enough wind, the battery technologies that we can develop. I visited a company that is proposing to make nuclear fusion, like we have in the sun, at a very, very high temperature, not cold fusion, using a different technique. Instead of trying to run protons into atoms that have an extra neutron, you'd run protons into boron hydrogen gas, like you have at home. And then you could have a tremendous amount of electricity produced very cheaply with no radiation. But these people, are planning to do it in an entrepreneurial fashion, which is good. But when you think about the extraordinary accomplishments of landing on the moon, that was not
an entrepreneurial exercise.
No, it was government investment directed. And you think about developing what everybody.
So we can have both. We can have entrepreneurs, but we need a government directed moonshot.
And we almost have it. We almost have it. We just got to decide that this is worth doing and work together to, dare I say it, change the world.
We shall do it, Bill. Thank you for being with us. It is great to have you here. Bill Nye, the Science Guy, is the host of the Science Rules podcast. Another urgent issue for the United States is election security. Right now, hackers from all over the country are in Las Vegas for the DEF CON hacking conference. It's one of the largest hacking conferences in the world that hosts a series of election-related events. So we're going to find our NBC News technology correspondent, Jake Ward. Jake, what are they doing and what are they finding?
So, Ali, at this point, they have really cracked open the machines you see behind me. These are some of the most common machines in use as of the 2018 election. Together, the two companies represented here, ES&S and Dominion, represent about 75% of the machines in use right now. And it's just amazing to be here because you can see lockpicks breaking out, people breaking out CF card readers, all kinds of systems that they use to get into these systems and check them out. It's really an incredible thing to watch.
What's the verdict, or how safe do these people think our election technology is?
It does not look good. Let me show you this. So they've cracked open one of a common system over here that you would use to register your votes, and they make little notes along the way as to what they found out. Your firmware update, the files go on the CF card. Check this out. They figured out the password. The admin password is rogue somehow for this device. I don't know how they figured that out, but they did in under 2 hours. We were just talking to a couple people over here who were wielding a lockpick set, and basically said, "Oh, it's easier than using the key." And managed to turn the key and get it into admin mode, which opens up a whole can of worms. So this is I mean, the verdict here is definitely not encouraging. These are really vulnerable systems to even a very smart room of people, but these guys all say that this is really kid stuff as far as they can say.
What motivates these people? Who are these people in the room? Well, I mean, these are hackers. They decide they want to hack election systems as good guys. What's going on?
It's so, that's so interesting, Ali. It's really interesting to talk to folks here. So several of them really won't tell us where they're from. They don't want to tell us their names. Many of these people sort of exist in a world where it just doesn't pay to be identified, certainly not on national news. And yet they are sort of patriotically motivated. I mean, they're here almost in an intellectually curious way to just sort of mess with these systems, see what they can do. But when you get to talking to them, there are people here who were former intelligence analysts. You have former military people, all of whom are just interested in this problem and can see that as opposed to the billions of dollars spent every year on the private companies and their cybersecurity infrastructure, there's almost nothing being spent on this. And so these, I find myself, I came in very nervous and had, turned off all my phones and everything, but I have to say, now that I'm here and I'm meeting these people, I'm very grateful that they're doing what they're doing.
Jacob, we're grateful that you're covering it. Thank you so much, NBC News technology correspondent Jake Ward. And that brings it to an end for me. I'm going to be back here, by the way, tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern for The Last Word. And then I'll see you again Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern with Stephanie Rule. And again at 3 p.m. Eastern. You can now watch or listen to this show on SiriusXM Radio. Tune in, msnbc.com/now, the MSNBC app, and Apple TV. You can find me all over social media. But right now it's time for Deadline White House with Nicole Wallace. Now.
Looks like they got the Geek Squad all coming together in some sort of a conference meeting. That way they can find out the loose ends in regard to our free, open, fair voting system. This should have been mandatorily mandated by the government in every state towards trying to figure out where the vulnerability loose ends are. This should have already been taken care of by high-ranking officials in every state, trying to determine if there was areas where they could tweak to make it a little more safer. That way we didn't have to worry about outer domestic or foreign influences. They should have brought people together like this. That way they could bridge the gaps, create the firewalls, and stop all this hacking that continues to happen either by North Korea, China, Russia, or other people all over the world. This should have been taken care of at least 2 or 3 years ago, towards mandating this type of party to come together, towards putting everybody's minds around what the heck are we going to be doing in the next election pertaining to cyberspace. As far as the food shortages, the ozone warming up, the environment changes, that's another area that should have been looked at probably as early as the 1990s, whenever we had someone here in the state of Tennessee by the name of Al Gore that was trying to put out red flag signals that something was going on environmentally with our atmosphere. We're gonna have to do better, folks. We're gonna have to wake up and realize where our vulnerabilities are and where we're screwing up and what we're doing wrong. If we plan on surviving into the next generation and our children and their children's children and their children's children's children have a chance towards becoming successful up onto this great grand planet that we call Mother Earth, we're gonna have to tighten our belts and do better. One may be asking, would you be, why do you focus so much attention on wanting to gather data in regards to your YouTube platform or your Facebook platform? Because I do still have a Facebook platform, even though it's not an active platform, in which they aggravate the you-know-what out of me almost every day towards all these different call girls that are steadily trying to infiltrate my existence on Facebook. That's one of the reasons why I got off Facebook, was because it was so nasty, sexually, morally speaking. But I continue to put out material like this, hoping that I will leave a fingerprint, hoping that I will leave a trail, hoping that I will be able to tell my story to somebody out there that may be interested one day pertaining to the YouTube movement, that, wow, this guy was really onto something, wasn't he? Wow, this guy was really trying to help us and not hurt us. Wow, this guy really wasn't a nut like everybody wanted to promote him as, pertaining to him being some sort of a terrorist in regard to the Bush administration, going all the way back to Ronald Reagan's administration. Wow, this guy really was on top of his game, just like Al Gore in raising red flags to all these different issues. Something has happened. I can't vouch for all the Tennesseans, which is somewhere in the neighborhood around 7.5 million people the last I looked. But something has happened to them towards them not accepting good, sound advice, either coming from the Bible or coming from our politicians, towards them believing or not believing in things that they should been believing in. Something has happened to them, and the only thing that I can steer towards is that they have been manipulated, they have been deceived, they have been bamboozled, in which now it's all coming full face, a 360 degrees, and the younger generation, the millennials, are the ones that are waking up to these facts and saying, we see what the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, and even other parts of the culture generations has caused. It's the millennials that are waking up to these barbaric actions that has put us in a very, very precarious situation, that now, if we don't watch, we're all going to have to suffer on the count of the rich, on the count of the greedy, on the count of those that did not care where our future was heading. In other words, they put it on autopilot, or they put it on cruise control and say, well, let it run itself. Well, it has. For the past 30 years, it's basically run itself. But the way that it's run itself into the ground. Us being $22.5 trillion in debt, 2.3 million people in America that is incarcerated, more people in America that's been incarcerated than any other country in the world. We're steadily building jails instead of building bridges. Instead of taking care of our infrastructure pertaining to the potholes that we have to run over every day, we're steadily doing something else. But in the meantime, the bank is going belly up. We're going bust because we cannot self-sustain in the direction that we're going in for very much longer before the whole country comes unraveled. These mighty pillars that are holding us up right now could very well bust, break, and fail before I wake up in the morning and see where every major institution in America has declared bankruptcy, and we was on our way to a faulty environment as far as declaring bankruptcy on all our indebtedness. And once you do something like that, then you take a very high risk, instead of them just trying to get you back in the form of tariffs, or trying to get you back towards boycotting various things that you're adapted to. Then you have to worry about an actual out and out war whenever a country invades another country because they owe trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars that they're not able to pay. It puts us in a very, very precarious state to the point that it's almost as if that war, total destruction, looms up over our heads simply because of those who put it on autopilot, those that put it on cruise control, that wasn't even concerned about their own children's future, much less their children's children and their children's future. This is the part here that has driven me off into a state of depression. This is the part here that has driven me off into a state of sadness. This is the part here that makes me shake my head to a society, and I say the same words that even Jesus Christ said whenever he went up into the mountain and he prayed for Jerusalem, and he said, Jerusalem, 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 I have gathered thee together as a hen would gather her chicks, but ye would not listen. Whenever people don't listen to the experts, whenever people don't listen to the messengers, whenever people don't listen to various politicians, whenever people don't listen to the very voice of God through various messengers, then is whenever things get turned totally upside down, and then is whenever we basically bring doom, gloom, and despair up in and onto our own lives at our own expense. And that's basically what the 60s and the 70s culture has done. You know, I was just going through some music profiles the other day, and I'm soon going to end here. I was going through some music profiles just the other day, and I stumbled upon Pink Floyd. We don't need no education. And I've never been against education. But what I have been against is the wrong education, the wrong information. During that era, whenever those songs was being played, as well as all that other hard rock music, people was living their lives, and they was dancing, and they was being free, and they was live and let live, and let's put beads in our hair and beads in our blue jeans, and let's just live like a bunch of hippies and not care about tomorrow. Well, now tomorrow has come. And the millennials, those who are 30 years and younger, are starting to scratch their heads, and they're starting to say, my God, what kind of idiots was these people? Selfish, greedy people that was concerned about their own well-being and wasn't even concerned about those who are being raised up now, much less their children and their children's children. We have reached a very, very dangerous state here in America, and it's not just the gun violence. It's all of it. It's all of it. And if there's ever been a time that we need an awakening, we need a revival, we need a revolution, it is today, as I'm sitting here talking to you and putting myself out on the line by putting information out there to the general public that some may agree with and others may not agree with. Anybody that puts themselves out there is subject to not just being ridiculed, but they're subject of people turning on them and possibly causing violence in their lives. And that's exactly what's occurred here in my life pertaining to David and I. Whenever I first come back here, it was almost, well, it wasn't almost, it was a planned tactic that they was using towards bombarding us almost every day, being attacked again and again and again and again. I can't tell you how many times that we contacted the sheriff's department up there towards SOS. Help, help, help. And the type of help that we got was a sheriff and a judge that was passing the buck from one to another, and nobody was wanting to give an account towards the behavior, the unprofessional behavior, the systemic behavior that we was having to be addressed with on a day-to-day level. And it is a systemic. It is some sort of a phobia that has caused these people to believe that I'm some sort of a boogeyman. I'm some sort of a monster. I'm some sort of a Loch Ness monster. They have created these ideals in their own heads, in their own minds. And that's what has caused the ripple effect of, we're to be leery of this one because of etc., 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 etc. In which, if their etceteras was correct, that would be one thing. But if their etceteras that they have created in their own minds has led to this of nothing but lies and innuendos, something has occurred here that goes beyond the normalcy of human behavior. This is exactly what happened to Jesus Christ during the time that he was walking and talking up into his land. They had created a phobia that one day they would see this magnificent man do this magnificent work, feeding 5,000 with 7 loaves, raising the dead, healing the blind, healing those that couldn't hear, walking on water, etc., etc., etc. And then they would flip in a few days or a few weeks, and then they would go, they would turn the very one that was doing the good works into the boogeyman. And even Jesus asked Pilate during the trial, "For what good work stonest thou me for?" And they come back with a reply, "Oh, we don't stone you for a good work. We stone you because you're saying to the people that you are the Savior, that you are the only begotten, that you are the Messiah, is the reason why that we're fixing to do what we're fixing to do to you." So the stigma was already there amongst the crowds and amongst the neighborhood over in Jerusalem. And I've been dealing with the same thing here. The stigma that people has created in their own minds and in their own hearts. They've gotten online, they've chit-chatted. It's gotten to the point now that whenever I get out on Sunday, I don't know that I'm going to be arrested. I don't know if I'm going to be shot at or shot. I don't know what the repercussions are going to be, because you have all these dancing ideals that are out there floating around from one computer base to another, as far as people chit-chatting, and now they're creating this own image of me without me having the right to be able to voice my opinion. So that's one of the reasons why that I'm putting out so much material to so many people, is because I feel like that I've got a right to tell my side of the story. I feel like that I've got a right to tell what's happening to me, and maybe society around here either don't care or isn't smart enough to care about what's been going on here. I don't know. But I do feel like that eventually history will catch up with the modern day times, and I was hoping that by now, at the age of 58, that it would have already done it, but it looks like that it's not going to do it, because there's so much of a wall of stigma out there as far as people being under this false pretense, this phobia that's been created by Satan. So many people that's been deceived, that's been bamboozled, and because of it, it is diminishing my works towards what I actually need to do before I walk off into eternity, which may be tomorrow, which may be tonight. No one is guaranteed a tomorrow. But I know this: I'm leaving a footprint. I'm leaving a mark up onto the tree, per se, that I was here. I told you so. I tried to help you. You didn't want to listen. You was already convinced that I was this way instead of this way. And because of the deceiving effect that has occurred in this area, it basically leaves me speechless in how to adapt to this type of resistance. So thanks again to my viewers. Thanks again for allowing for me to speak. If there's ever been a time that we needed to bond and pray together, and united we stand, divided we fall, just like Jesus said about the house, a house divided against itself would not be able to stand. If there's ever been a time that we really needed to stick together in regards to all this, it's today. Because guess what, folks? The boat has started to sink in. The storm clouds, instead of just seeing them over the horizon, now they're over on top of us, pertaining to all these gun shootings, pertaining to all these problems, pertaining to our political affairs, pertaining to us having 2.3 million people incarcerated in jails and $22.5 trillion in debt. The storm clouds is over us. It's not a matter of can we see what's coming. Now it's a matter of it's here. And now what are we going to do with it? Thanks again to my viewers. Good luck to all of us. And once more, shalom.
People, all of whom are just interested in this problem and can see that as opposed to the billions of dollars spent every year on the private companies and their cybersecurity infrastructure, there's almost nothing being spent on this. And so
there's almost nothing being spent on this. That speaks volumes about the people that's in power right now, regardless whether it's the governor, the lieutenant governor, regardless whether it just be your local town sheriff or your judge or whoever that holds authority in your area. It speaks volumes in how that they either don't care to address the problem or they're not capable of addressing the problem. I've always been told that a chain is strongest as its weak link. Okay? And a good general, a good military advisor would tell you that if they can't handle what the problem is, they'll find somebody that can. It's the same way in business. It's the same way in government. If you're not smart enough to figure out where the loopholes are, then you hire people that can go in and make changes. That way you don't have to worry about the infrastructure being compromised pertaining to hackers and people busting in on our free, fair, open elections. It's sad where we are right now. Extremely sad. And I don't know if it's being done intentionally. I don't know if it's being done unintentionally. But the bottom line is this: it's being done. It's being done. And until we wake up in identifying our adversary and what our adversary is up to and what our adversary is capable of doing towards bringing destruction, not only in our savings accounts, not only in our credit card accounts, not only in our voting booths, but what's next? Shutting down a whole city? Paralyzing a whole city? Paralyzing maybe even a whole country? What's next? You have to ask yourself a question. What are we dealing with here? We're dealing with something like we've never dealt with in the 21st century. How come we are not on top of our game? That's the $64,000 question here. Thanks again. Shalom. See ya. Bye. Thanks for letting me speak.